A surprising blowout in the Big Ten. Women's basketball, I thought this was going to be the other way around, if I'm completely honest, but Maryland just took it to Ohio State. Ohio State is struggling in the last 5 games, falling 4 of the last 5, and Maryland getting the largest victory, Steve, in program history against a top 10 team. What, 36 points? This is the largest victory against a top 10 team since Penn State in 91. I know that you hate to see a Penn State a record falter on your side. I know that you'd love to hear the Penn State stay and go, but what Maryland just had a fantastic game in this one, putting the hurt on Ohio State, 90-54, the lowest Ohio State has scored all season long. Take me through this one as Maryland, now the number 8 team in the country, moves to 19-5 against the Buckeyes.
Yeah. Well, no, in fairness, the women's programs at Penn State, I always root for. Because it's one thing for Joe Paterno to have totally screwed the rest of the athletic department by doing the things he did, but the women's programs absolutely got screwed. So I always try to root them on. So we can only hope that Joe Paterno is on a spit down below for what he did to Penn State athletics other than football. But that's a different show, Christian. I mean, honestly, this was a beatdown. I mean, it's the only way. I was trying to come up with all these really cool adjectives to describe it. It was a beatdown. I mean, I tuned in for the second quarter. I missed the first quarter, and I was just shocked. I mean, at no point did Ohio State seem to be in this game in any way. So, for Maryland, I mean, this is a huge, Brenda Free's huge win, especially going into what's happening up on their schedules coming up here, which I know we'll talk about a little bit later. But it was amazing. Diamond Miller, she was on a mission. I would say that there was some fouls that could have been called on Ohio State that were not. And I think because of the fact that Diamond Miller, to her own admission, says people say I'm a dirty player. And I don't think she is. She's an aggressive player. She's a very physical player. But, I mean, I kind of got a kick out of her flexing a lot at different parts of the game because she was making sure that everybody on the Ohio State side and everybody on TV that was watching knew this is our game. And it wasn't even just her. I mean, I thought Abby Meyer had a terrific game, especially early. I mean, she scored 11 of the first 19 points. And so I missed that part of the performance. But, yeah, this was just total dominance on the part of the Terps.
Yeah, and don't forget about Sellers as well. Sellers had a good one at 19 points. But yeah, you saw some fantastic play, and you have to obviously talk about Diamond Miller. 11 for 16 from the field. She had her only shot from 3-point line she made. She had 10 rebounds. She had a double-double in this one, and only 30 minutes of play. Every single minute she was on the court, she was fantastic. And you're right. Even when she was flexing against Ohio State, she was proving a message. She was pushing that message across saying, hey, Ohio State, for the beginning of the season until about 2 weeks ago, you were the team to beat in the Big Ten. That is no longer the case. It might still not be Maryland as they sit number 3 in the Big Ten, but they definitely are showing that they are not a team to be messed with, and they are going to be a force and one of those maybe a possibly sleeper team to get maybe Sweet 16, maybe even farther once we get tournament time. I know it's still a little bit of ways away, but we're starting to take shape of what we're seeing from this conference. Ohio State is falling. It's faltering. Like, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, Steve, they've lost 4 of the last 5. We've seen their top player, McCaskill. She's had a rough go the last couple games. She had 12 in this one. In her win against Wisconsin, she had 21 points. Great. But she hasn't passed 20 points in any of the losses this season. So it seems like when she gets shut down, they do not perform well. This was a whole team issue, though. I'm not going to give this entire fail on Taylor for her mess up, or I wouldn't say mess up, but her poor performance in this one. Ohio State scored 54 points in this one. This was their lowest game by far. Their lowest game before that was 65 points, right? So there's just a lot of things Ohio State needs to get fixed. And you have to think that there are plenty of concerns going on in that locker room as you go from starting the season off 19-0, and now you sit at 20-4, losing 4 of your last 5.
Well, there has to be, because of, again, if those losses had been spread out a little bit, okay. and then you're still saying, hey, we're having a pretty good year. Everything's okay. We're having a pretty good year. But when you're losing games in conference, that ultimately will affect your seeding in the conference tournament. And in a conference like the Big Ten, which I think it's safe to say it's the best conference in women's basketball, top to bottom. We always talk about the Big 12. I think the Big 12's got a great job. SEC, I think, is very top heavy. But I think top to bottom, I mean, there is not a night off, really. I don't think with any team in the Big Ten. Records, put the records aside. I really don't think that there's a night off for any game in the Big Ten. So you really want the highest seed that you could get, and I think Ohio State really is putting themselves behind an 8 ball, from that standpoint. You know what I took away from this game? And Maryland's been inconsistent too. To be fair, they've had some
you're right.
Really off nights as well as some just amazing nights. I mean, we've covered them a lot, this season. When they are firing on all cylinders, when they are at their best, when Diamond Miller is playing the way that she did, and really, it was a complete team effort. There were a lot of really great efforts here, but when they are playing at their best, they can beat anybody in the country. And I think that's what a lot of those flexes were. I mean, they could beat anybody in the country. Dare I say, they could match up pretty decently against even South Carolina. Now, I don't think they would beat South Carolina, but I mean, if they're playing like this, if this is how they're going to play the rest of the way, now we're having a totally different conversation about what's going on in the Big Ten.
Yeah, we've seen an up and down Maryland team this year. There's no doubt about it. I mean, obviously they did play South Carolina at the beginning of the year, and it was an 81-56 final. They did not play well against South Carolina. Right. Now, I think that if they played them again right now, I think that it would be a different result. Not saying it might be a win for Maryland, like you said, but there's no way that it's a 25-point margin in my mind. I think Maryland is firing on all cylinders. Not saying that South Carolina isn't by any chance. We just saw their nice win against UConn. However, regardless, I do think Maryland is looking as a good team. I like what you mentioned about the Big Ten, thinking that it's the best team in college basketball. I mean, it backs it up. There are only 2 conferences right now that have 5 teams in the top 15. The Big Ten is one of them. The other one is the ACC. But if you take the other teams that are more top heavy right now, Big Ten kind of takes the cake on that one. You got more of the ACC towards the bottom of that top 15. Regardless, having 10 of your top 15 teams are in 2 conferences. So if you're trying to figure out what women's college or women's conference tournaments to watch, well, I recommend Big Ten and ACC because you're going to get some really good ones in that one. And then, of course, SEC is always going to be fun. But yeah, I mean, let's talk about this Ohio State. Let's finish up with them real fast. They lost the last 4 of their 5. The only win they have is a win against Wisconsin, who are struggling this year. They only have 2 wins in conference. Now they had the take on Minnesota, who's also struggling in conference. They have the same record as Wisconsin. So you have to maybe think they're going to have the same result after the same Wisconsin win. But then they go and face number 2 Indiana, who it's just not going to be a good thing for them. If you ask me, they already lost 78-65 at the end of January. Now they're going to have to face them again. This time it is at home, but not a good thing. This is going to be a really tough week for Ohio State. Hopefully they can get the win against Minnesota, but hosting Indiana, number 2 in the country.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. And then, I mean, I think Indiana showed what they're made of. I mean, personally, and again, I'm biased because I'm president of the Pennsylvania chapter of the Caitlin Clark fan club. I think Iowa should be ranked ahead of Indiana. But I mean, Indiana is an awfully deep team, and there's length to that lineup. So even when they have to go to their bench, though they don't do it as often, perhaps as they could, I think Indiana is one hell of a basketball team. Ohio State has to figure something out. You have to think, and this is terrible to say because of all the COVID issues with the men's side. I mean, you have to hope, you got to figure that, the Ohio State staff has got little gopher voodoo dolls, putting little pins in it, hoping that this game gets canceled so they have a full week of practice before they come in to this game against Indiana. Because, I mean, if they play they have to have 100% improvement, not just market improvement or some improvement. They have to have 100% improvement over what they showed here in this game against Maryland to even stay in the contest against Indiana, I would think.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I do think that's the case. I think Ohio State's really going to have to bring it against Indiana, as that game is going to be on Monday coming up at the beginning of next week. So definitely tune in for that one. As for Maryland, we have seen peaks and valleys with this team. They found themselves back in the top 10 this season. They take on Northwestern on Thursday night. Then they take Illinois on Sunday. But we're going to see them against a team later on towards the end of this month against Iowa, the team that beat Ohio State for the first time this season. Caitlin Clark and company. Caitlin Clark, I think right now, in my opinion, is the player of the year. I think it's hard to debate against that. And then we will see the rematch of Maryland, Ohio State before the month of February ends. That's where Maryland's season ends, regular season ends against Ohio State. This will be the rematch. Where do you see Maryland going into after a game against Iowa and Ohio State? That's how they end their season. Where do you see them heading into Big Ten conference play? They are currently the 3rd seed.
I would imagine they're going to sit there. I really think that the Maryland we saw against Ohio State is closer to that team's ceiling than what we maybe have witnessed at the early stages of Big Ten play. I wouldn't want to be playing Maryland in the Big Ten. I really wouldn't. I don't really see. I don't know how they'll match up against Iowa. Though again, Abby Meyer, she can defend any guard in the conference, and that includes, pistol Caitlin Clark there. So it's a wild card. I mean, if Maryland wins the Big Ten tournament, let's say, which they're certainly capable of doing, that's certainly going to improve their seeding in the tournament. So maybe now you could seriously say Maryland could get to the second weekend and not just, maybe win the first round and then see what happens in the second. I mean, I think you could legitimately say they could easily get to that second weekend. In fact, it would not surprise me if there's 4 teams out of the Big Ten getting, depending on where everybody's put in the bracket, I could easily see a road where 4 teams from the Big Ten make it to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, I do too. I can totally see that. As for Maryland, if you're thinking how they might match up against Iowa, well, last time they faced off, they lost 96-82. Caitlin Clark scored 42 points against this Maryland squad. She was absolutely electric. Diamond Miller had a great game, 27. Sellers also had 26, but they shot 11% from the three-point line. So they definitely have to improve their shooting. They have to, they played great on the boards, but their shooting was bad. Really all around. They only shot 42%. Iowa shot over 60% from the field. So if they want to play good against this Iowa team, maybe find themselves maybe as the 2nd seed, possibly going into Big Ten play. I don't know how big you're pushing towards that, but having a top 3 seed in the conference is going to be absolutely huge. Yeah. They are in a great spot. Watch out for this team as we get ready for conference tournament play, especially after this huge statement win against the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Yeah, it's so much fun this time of year. It really is. And now every game matters. You can't say anymore, hey, we had an off night or we had an off week. Every game matters. It's certainly going to matter going through the rest of the year for Ohio State. They cannot afford really to lose the rest of the way if they want a pretty healthy seed. And for Maryland, I think its statement, that flexing is showing, hey, we can play with anyone. And I really believe that, having watched the majority of this game, Maryland can play with anyone.
Be sure to let us know your thoughts about this Big Ten conference and this Maryland Ohio State team. Be sure to just throw your comments below. Hit like and subscribe while you're there. We'd love talking college basketball, especially women's college basketball this season. So let us know all your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe. And thank you for watching. Slasher U.